Black perspectives haven't always been centered in the telling of America's story. Now, we're taking center stage. Introducing NPR's Black Stories, Black Truths, a collection of Black-led stories from NPR's podcasts. Search NPR Black Stories, Black Truths wherever you get your podcasts.
Support comes from Mercedes-Benz of Buckhead, where the power of electric meets the power of Mercedes. Introducing a lineup of electric vehicles, the EQB, the EQS sedan and SUV, the EQE sedan and SUV. The vehicles are all electric. The feeling is all Mercedes. Mercedesofbuckhead.com.
Welcome back to another week of our Political Breakfast podcast. We are so glad you are here and listening on WABE. Here today, we're all here today. Republican strategist Brian Robinson, Democratic strategist Tharon Johnson, and our wonderful producer Lily Oppenheimer. So hello to all of you.
Good morning.
Hey, Lisa. It's good to be here. It's a really good weekend in Atlanta, but it's so cold. It was so cold.
Today feels warm compared to what it's been.
Yeah, a little warmer today. It's supposed to get up to the 50s, but still, you know, that chill is in the air. Why was it such a good weekend? No Falcons football or anything over the weekend, but we had a few others. I was pulling for that number 8 in the deep purple over the weekend, so Baltimore had a good weekend, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Lamar Jackson, who, got that bag before the season started and really, I think, had the most pressure on him to win, and then really feel bad for the Bills Nation out there. Josh Allen and the team didn't make it, but one thing they say, Lisa, you can't ever count 15 out.
Right.
Patty Mahomes, as they call him, is a beast, and he did well. And then let me just say this again: this Bill Belichick stuff, I'm worried about it. I just don't think he fits the Atlanta culture.
Really?
But apparently, I just don't. And I'm still not over that 2017 Super Bowl loss. I'm gonna call myself out. I'm still not over 6 years later.
I don't think anybody is. I don't think anybody.
So why
would
we bring the guy in who basically led the drive, to basically come back from 28-3, and I just don't think he's the same coach without Tom Brady. But apparently, I saw today they're interviewing some other coaches, and so let's see what happens.
But they've talked to him twice, so that's a sign there. Yeah, they're taking him very seriously.
Yeah. But he is the winningest coach of all time as far as Super Bowl go, and there's that. But my concern is the age. Somehow that we keep coming back to concerns about age for me on this show, but it would be true of Belichick as well. I mean, when you're in your early 70s, it's such an intense job. You just can't do that at this pace, into those later years. That's tough, man.
Well, Brian, I was going to wait till later in the show, but you opened up the floodgates. So you've been bashing my boy Uncle Joe about his age and his speaking ability, and sometimes he forgets stuff.
Yeah.
Your boy, not literally your boy, but, the Republican running for president, mistakenly, made what I think I counted 7 references to Nikki Haley, and he thought he was talking about Nancy Pelosi. So I'm waiting to hear your criticism of Donald Trump, who apparently has not got it all there. I mean, the elevators are going up, but we don't know where it's going. I expect that same criticism you give to Uncle Joe, you give it to your boy Trump too.
I am not going to be inconsistent. And a lot of what Nikki Haley says about the new generation does speak to me. And what I have said, and Tharon and I, Lisa, do a lot of stuff together off air, speaking to groups, and one thing that I consistently say is that Republicans are going to nominate the guy who is going to make it competitive with Biden, and the Democrats are going to nominate the one guy who might lose to Trump. So, both parties would probably, just on the political end, do better if they nominated somebody in their 50s or even 60s these days. Sounds like a spring chicken, and this, in the way that this is going.
So age is not just a number, huh?
Age is not just a number. No, I tell you, my dad's in his late 70s. He would tell you, I'm not what I used to be. Right?
Yeah,
right? It's just how it is.
My mom is 79, and she's going to kill me, Lisa, for saying her age on this podcast. And she says that too, but, she oftentimes reminds me that she still has a function of mind and that she's going to take care of herself as long as she can. So while she's a little seasoned in age, I mean, she still has a young heart. But again, B-Rob, I don't think that was good for Trump. And I think our listeners have heard you for what now, maybe 5 or 6 months just talk about Joe Biden's age. But Trump was bad, man. That was
what
pretty
happened
bad.
there? What do you think happened there?
I don't know. Maybe it is age. I don't know. Obviously, it was a flub. But I'll say this: when it comes to the politics, I mean, and I hear you. I mean, I saw it too. And age is more than just a number. And like your mom, Tharon, my dad, and my mom are still mentally acute as well. But something happens to some people, and what I'm going on is voters tend to put Biden in a different category than Trump. There is an age difference. Maybe, what is that? 4 years, something like that.
I think it's like 4.
But it's the stumbles. It's the sort of looking like he's out of it from time to time. This could change if Trump runs the risk, if he has a lot more of these moments, of neutralizing the issue that Republicans have in this race, as far as voters don't think Biden is all there anymore. So it's something that they got to get right. They can't have bad visuals. And, Biden has some bad visuals. This, the stumbling, the falling over the teleprompter at the Service Academy graduation, the stumbling up the steps, that kind of stuff. We saw, even going back to Gerald Ford 50 years ago, that becoming an issue. And Gerald Ford was probably the most athletic president we've ever had. He was a college football player, right? So these things have a way of taking hold, and Trump's got to guard against that.
Well, let's talk about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Late in the afternoon during all the football games, the breaking news was coming across that he had ended his Republican United States presidential campaign just before the New Hampshire primary. And, I was thinking, that's big news, but is it big news here in Georgia? How does that filter and trickle down to what's could possibly happen here in Georgia and how it could translate in the presidential race? Tharon, I'll begin with you.
Yeah, I'll be quick on this one, Lisa, because I know Brian has a lot more insight than I do. And I got to give B-Rob a little credit. We were on CNN Sunday morning, early. But anyway, as we're on the set, Victor Blackwell sort of turns to Brian, and him and Brian have this really unique banter. It's really funny because, Brian goes into CNN, which is, not always that welcoming to Republicans, just like me going to Fox News.
Thank you for noticing.
But I think shout out to CNN, and nothing against other networks. I mean, they do like to have that balanced perspective. But anyway, as we're there Sunday morning, bright and early, we were talking about Ron DeSantis, and Brian basically, and I'll let him tell you what he talked about as far as what he was hearing, but I just thought it was interesting, Lisa, that this is a man who we've seen that has done a lot of things that have been controversial in Florida, dealing with, sort of what's being taught in schools. He beat Andrew Gillum for governor. I mean, came out of kind of nowhere. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, B-Rob, but he was in the Congress and immediately started throwing a lot of red meat to his base. I mean, we knew when he became governor of Florida, he instantaneously became a nominee for president as a Republican. And so he had all of this momentum going into the race. And then boom, out of nowhere, not only the reemergence of Donald Trump running again with all of his indictments and all of his, sort of impeachments, but then you got to give credit to Nikki Haley, who many thought would do well, but did not think that she would do this well. And so I think for him to pull out of the race leading up to the New Hampshire primary and having a poor performance in Iowa, really he said, look, I got to go back and start focusing on being governor of Florida. And I think it also was a move for him to try to have a political future within the Republican Party and admitting that neither him and maybe some others cannot beat Donald Trump at this stage.
Yeah. When it comes to the localized angle on this, Lisa, that you were asking about, we saw Monday morning news coming out of a new cachet of Republican office holders in Georgia endorsing Trump. Now that it's the person-to-person race, you're seeing more Republicans who have been on the sidelines waiting to see how the primaries unfold coming out in favor of Donald Trump. None of the ones that we saw are shocking. Tyler Harper, our agriculture commissioner, who was a big Trump supporter going back to 2016, Lieutenant Governor Burr Jones, who was one of the first elected officials in Georgia to endorse Trump going back to 2015, and then a bunch of state senators, largely from sort of the deepest red pockets of rural Georgia, coming out. Although also, Greg Dolezal out of Forsyth County, a coming area. So you're seeing that's where it's making a difference locally, is people coming out. We also have some Nikki Haley folks here. Representative Scott Hilton from Gwinnett County went to Iowa and spoke for Nikki Haley in those caucuses. I think he had a great time. He's gotten some media coverage out of that venture up there. But you're going to see in Georgia that even though the Georgia Republican Party stood up to Trump in 2022 and didn't do what he wanted, making it a very unique state in that way. Everywhere else, Republicans followed Trump's lead. Even though we have that history and that brand of being iconoclast to some degree, you're going to see us following the pattern of the rest of the country, and you're seeing Republicans fall in line for former President Trump. I do think the race can go in a little bit if we see a win, even a small one, for Nikki Haley in New Hampshire. But if Trump wins by any margin in a state where independents get to vote in the primary, particularly considering the independents don't have a real Democratic primary to go participate in, then this thing's over. It's over this week. And Tharon mentioned that interview. One of the things that we were asked about was, why is it in South Carolina, the governor, the junior U.S. senator who was appointed by Nikki Haley to the Senate, several members of Congress, the lieutenant governor, why are all these people coming out for Donald Trump when they have one of their own, Nikki Haley of South Carolina, still in the race? Well, I think part of it is the party is falling into line because they see the writing on the wall. And part of it is, I think Nikki Haley made some enemies when she was governor of South Carolina. There's a carrot approach and a stick approach, and apparently she liked the stick approach back there in South Carolina. And so, but I think both things are true, falling in line and perhaps a little grudge holding there against Nikki Haley back home.
Tharon, are Democrats behind the scene? I don't know. Is this inevitable? And are they embracing the fact that it will likely be a Trump-Biden presidential campaign?
So, you guys, our listeners can't really see my office, but, I'm actually, it's a work in progress. But when I'm down here and I'm thinking about, how do we win in 2024, part of the reason why I'm being a little bit more available to talk about a presidential race, Lisa, is because I got to do my part, right? And that was one of the things that former President Barack Obama at our reunion has sort of said to us privately, and he sort of stressed the urgency in our Washington Post ad that we all got to get off the sidelines and get involved to support Uncle Joe Biden to make sure he's elected president. So here's what I'm thinking. All right, if it's Trump, based on polling, it looks like head to head, we're in good shape, right? Because while he has the lowest, margin, I mean, he's not as ahead of Biden in the battleground states as like a Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. We don't even talk to him anymore. So where do these Ron DeSantis voters go? And I think a majority of them probably go to Trump, right? And to Brian's point, which is why it looks like he's going to be the nominee. So I believe on this day, Lisa, on this week in January, that a rematch between Donald Trump and Joe Biden it favors us because we beat them before. We'll have the money. We just had the Biden campaign just had a record-breaking quarter where they raised upwards of $97 million and got over $100+ million on hand. And, Donald Trump will be well-funded too. But then it's like, all right, well, if Trump is not the nominee, then is Nikki Haley better for us in the general? And based on what I'm seeing in polling and the women and the men, but mostly women I've talked to, Nikki Haley quietly, Lisa, has a lot of support amongst Republicans. And I think that honestly, the challenge she's having is that I go back to this primary system. I mean, you got Iowa, you got New Hampshire. And then as Brian pointed out, she's got South Carolina coming up pretty soon. But it's going to be very hard for her to win in this process. And so what the Biden campaign is doing, and shout out to them finally announcing someone in Georgia. I'll squeeze this in, Lisa, really quickly, but they hire a veteran strategist, African-American woman who I've known for a long time, Jonae Wartell, to come in and sort of lead the efforts in Georgia. And then they're making these strategic hires all over the country. And so I think the ground game is prepared for a Trump Biden rematch. If it happens to not be Trump, which it definitely looks like it's going to be Trump, then it becomes like who's going to be his VP nominee, right? And then, you see the resurgence of Kamala Harris, Vice President of the United States, and Biden appearing together. And so I think right now, if I had to call it, Lisa, on this day, this week in January, I would say that we better get ready for this rematch. And I think the VP selection on the Trump side will play a difference. I think Vice President Harris will shine in those debates. But, politics is strange and campaigns are not over until they're over. But I think the rematch between Biden and Trump definitely is something that we're prepared for.
Yeah, Brian, you've got more and more Republicans endorsing Trump, but are they doing it reluctantly because he is leading in the polls the way that he is?
I think the ones that you see stepping forward at this point aren't doing it reluctantly. They don't have to get into the fray at this juncture. They could stay on the sidelines and say, I'm going to wait to see how this plays out. I'm going to wait to see what happens in Georgia, which would be a complete load of crap because it's going to be over long before it ever gets to Georgia's voters in March. I think these are folks who, for them, being for Trump is good politics back in their districts. And I think beyond just the politics of it, I think a lot of them are just MAGA voters. So it's just kind of where they are. Tharon said something of note there. He's talking about in his own conversations with Republicans, he is hearing a lot of support for Nikki Haley. Let me explain why Tharon is hearing that. Tharon's social group, as far as what Republicans he is talking to, are the type of demographics who are open to a non-Trump candidacy. Whether it's not just women, it's also men. But if you're a white voter who was a Republican growing up, maybe a Republican up till the Trump era, but college educated, live in a metro region, somewhat wealthy, financially secure, those groups are open to someone beyond Trump. Those groups don't want Biden or Trump. And so they're looking for some third option. The party that gave them some other option would probably get a really fair hearing from them. But I think what we see in these circles in Metro Atlanta aren't representative of the base. I think it's something the national media misses a lot because they talk to Republicans who are from that demographic group, the consultant class who are educated and fairly well off. They're not really connected to the voters in rural parts of our state and of the country. And that is the base of the party today. And, the elites don't know those folks. The media don't know those folks. And I think in a lot of ways don't understand them. And I think because what do you hear all the time when you're watching national media from non-Republican based folks? How in the world could people be for Trump? Well, when you go and talk to them, you hear a very different perspective, a very different worldview than what you see from metropolitan elites.
Hey, y'all, I'm Mark Kendall.
And I'm David Perdue.
And we're the hosts of What's Good Atlanta, the new weekly comedy podcast from WABE.
On What's Good Atlanta, we run down uplifting and unusual headlines from the universe known as Atlanta.
And while we may not be journalists, we are comedians, and we'll be breaking down news and breaking down the stories that make you smile.
We're just trying to see what's good, Atlanta.
Episodes drop Fridays at WABE.org or wherever you get your podcasts. I get mine from a guy named Craig.
Shout out to Craig.
WABE. The world has changed, from shifts in power to a mental health crisis. So with all this social change, how do we balance the human desire for empathy, the business need for productivity, and the hope to make an impact in our community? This is a new podcast, The Social Impact Leader. I'm Jeff Schinnebarker. Join me as we explore people doing work a little different. Available every Wednesday at wabe.org/podcast or wherever you get your podcasts.
WABE.
But really, did either of you think that here we are 4 years later with this matchup, with the same matchup, Trump and Biden, in wake of what has transpired over the past few years? You've got a defamation trial taking place involving Trump. You've got election fraud. You've got all this stuff. Did you think we would be here again? Seriously.
I did, for two reasons, really quickly. One, look, there's power in incumbency. And true of the matter is, even though Donald Trump was defeated by Joe Biden, he is still treated and looked at by many as an incumbent president who lost, but is running in a Republican primary. It's just so hard to beat. And that will happen on the Democratic side. The thing that I'm shocked about, Lisa, is Brian and other, I mean, he just articulated it, right? Like, there are a lot of Republicans out there who believe that Donald Trump is not the best option and that someone else could possibly be a better matchup against President Biden. But I don't know if it's because they just say, okay, well, you know what? We want somebody that's going to be more aggressive or someone who's going to, be more on the offense when it comes to, I mean, clearly they have accepted all the negative things that come along for reelecting him. And keep in mind, just remind our listeners, these are primary voters, and these are mostly people who are just diehard for the party folks. And so they're not really thinking about a November election. They're thinking about who we want to vote in the primary. So the thing I would warn Democrats is that the one thing we can't really gauge is the level of enthusiasm that is or is not behind Donald Trump. Now, if you look at the vote in Iowa, and I know we're going to wait to see what happened in New Hampshire. If he wins that by a wide margin, everyone drops out, then this coalition that Brian has kind of talked about, they're going to just say, you know what, now it all becomes about trying to beat President Biden. Yeah, we know this guy is flawed. He's got some challenges, but he may also have some strength. So I'm not shocked. I'm just shocked as how quickly it's happening, Lisa. I thought it would be more competitive. I thought you would see Donald Trump fight these Republican candidates probably at least until March. As B-Rob has indicated, I mean, this could be over in the next week or so. I mean, Nikki Haley drops out after New Hampshire. It's a wrap. And now we get into head-to-head mode, which I think favors Democrats because now we're able to go comparison and contrast. And I think that's what Joe Biden and his candidacy will shine.
On that, and Tharon talked about the Trump side, so I'll look at the Republican view on Biden's side, if I could. And Biden, to me, could have been a generation transition candidate, right? He's not even a baby boomer. He's from the silent generation, right? The baby boomers were born after World War II. He was born during World War II. So he's a throwback beyond presidents from the baby boom generation that go back to Bill Clinton. He's older than Bill Clinton. And he had a moral, in his view, in a Democrat's view, imperative for being in the race in 2020 because Democrats, were so intent on beating Donald Trump. They saw that as what they needed to do for the country. And Biden believed, obviously, that he was the best candidate to do it, that he could be seen as a steady hand at the wheel, that as the grown-up in the room, as somebody who came across at least as more moderate than some of the more progressive younger candidates that we saw in that crowded field in 2020 for the Democrats. A lot of that theory played out. He won by 7 million votes, even though a lot of Republicans dispute that. I believe that those numbers are right. It would have been the best thing for his party, in my opinion, to say, look, we saved democracy. We got the country back on the right track. I got us through COVID. I laid the groundwork for a new generation of green energy, renewable energy, even though I personally think that's natural industrial policy that never works in the long run. And it's time to hand off the baton, just like I promised, to a new generation. I think he couldn't do that in his first 2 years because then he's automatically a lame duck and can't do anything in Washington. But he could have waited until like summer of 2023 and said, all right, open field. I'm not gonna tap Kamala Harris. I'm going to say, bring your best and brightest, run for office. It's time for the next generation. And he didn't do that. And Democrats may pay a very big price for that. They may undermine his original reason for running, which was getting rid of Trump, by reopening the door to Trump.
You agree with that? I see you nodding your head there. You agree with all that?
No, of course I don't agree with that. No, I'm not in my head because it's Brian sort of making the point of really discouraging us. Lisa, I mean, here's the thing, right? We're raw on this podcast, right? I mean, we're on TV. It's a little bit more. I hate to say this, but you kind of know what you're going to say. You got to do a cadence, but this is more, sort of a kitchen table talk. Look, Joe Biden is our nominee. And we knew when we elected him president of the United States, he's our president, he was going to run for re-election. Now, what has changed, to Brian's point, is, remember, we had a competitive primary on the Democratic side. I mean, I like then Senator Kamala Harris, huge fan of Cory Booker. Pete Buttigieg grew on me as time went on. I mean, we had our superstars, right? And a lot of them are still, Gavin Newsom is still out there. I mean, people are, just raving about him. But we as Democrats, we know that we got to be behind the president. And what has changed, yes, he's gotten a little older, but I think he's also gotten wiser. And I'm just saying, just stay tuned. When we get to the head-to-head matchup and we start talking about where we were when Donald Trump was president and where we are now, there's going to be robust debate on the economy. There's going to be robust debate on a lot of different things. But I think that the president and his team will be able to show that just focus on one thing. I mean, what we're doing around the economy, but also around healthcare, infrastructure. Remember that word? That was a huge word that Donald Trump promised us all this money and all these transformational initiatives that didn't happen. I mean, once the American people hear these things, you'll be able to get beyond the age. And I think that one thing that we're just not hearing going into this election, this is a big point, Lisa. When you start seeing the demise of Donald Trump is when all the people around him started going to jail. Right, when all the people around him were getting, sort of locked up and people were being investigated. I mean, that all happened around this time when he was running for re-election. And now, the only thing we have on the Biden side, I know Brian thinking this, is that you do have this ongoing situation with Hunter Biden, right? But beyond that, the other issues are more political and things that I think the president can overcome. And so, no, he was never going to step out of the way and not run for re-election. I mean, that's what presidents do. They run for a second term. Now, whether they win or not, we'll see. So he was never going to step aside and let someone younger do it unless he was physically and mentally unable to do it. And I believe that he's physically, emotionally, and mentally able to continue to be the president of the United States, not just today, but for 4 more years, because he's surrounding himself with the right team.
All right, it'll be interesting what kind of conversation we'll have after the New Hampshire primary and what that means to us here in Georgia. Tharon Johnson is a Democratic strategist, public affairs and government consultant, and most recently a senior advisor to the Biden Georgia campaign. Brian Robinson is a Republican strategist, communications consultant, and former deputy chief of staff for Governor Nathan Deal. Thanks, guys. Let's do it again real soon.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hey, it's Alex Sujong-Laughlin and Kelsey McKinney
from the Normal Gossip podcast.
We're so excited to announce that we're bringing our show live to a stage near you.
Normal Gossip is coming to Atlanta on March 8th at Symphony Hall, and we can't wait to see you there.
Join us for glow sticks, a real squirrel hat, secrets, and a great gossip story we can't stop telling.
Tickets are on sale now at normalgossiplive.com.